Hi, I'm Ryan Virden, founder and director of Lir Cultural Coaching. I want to share an idea that has come to fundamentally capture how I think about organizational culture. Over the years, I've worked with organizations across sectors that were all trying to strengthen their culture. Every one of those organizations had values, and the vast majority of them had those values written down somewhere on a website, in a strategic plan, in a handbook. Some of those organizations even put them on the wall. But the people inside those organizations often had very different understandings of what those values actually meant. So before we go any further, I want to ask you a question. Think about the healthiest organization you've ever worked in. What made it healthy? It probably wasn't simply that the organization had strong values. More than likely, it was that those values showed up consistently. They showed up in the decisions that were made, how people were communicated with, how conflict was handled, how people were supported, and how accountability worked. The values weren't just stated, they were experienced. That is the distinction at the heart of what Lir is doing. For a long time, organizations have approached culture as though culture itself were the thing they needed to fix. So when there's conflict, low trust, inconsistent leadership, or turnover, the conclusion is we have a culture problem. But I've come to believe that not many organizations actually have culture problems. They have alignment problems. This is the Lir blueprint. It represents how we think about organizational culture here at Lir. At one end of the bridge is an organization's values, what that organization says it believes, and the commitment it makes to its people. At the other end is the daily experience, what is actually encountered by the people who work within, are served by, or interact with the organization. Alignment is the bridge between those values and daily experience. When an organization is aligned, people see and feel and hear the alignment in the everyday life of the organization. When they're misaligned, though, those values might sound compelling, but that's not the experience. They're in competition. There's misalignment. And over time, the repeated experience of misalignment becomes the organization's culture. That's why we say culture is the result, alignment is the work. The blueprint identifies 8 organizational capacities that shape alignment: leadership, systems, relationships, communication, belonging, accountability, learning, and adaptability. Now, these capacities are all interconnected. Leadership shapes priorities and decisions. Systems turn those decisions into consistent practices. Communication determines whether people understand what is happening and where and how they can raise concerns. Relationships influence trust and people's willingness to engage in conflict or take risks. Accountability determines whether commitments have meaning. Belonging shapes whether people feel they can fully participate. Learning allows people and organizations to grow. Adaptability determines whether the organization can respond when something is no longer working. Importantly, organizations are rarely completely aligned or completely misaligned. They may have strong relationships, but unclear systems. They may communicate their values well, but fail to hold people accountable to them. They may invest in learning and development, while the leaders continue making decisions that contradict with what people have just been taught. The goal of this is actually not perfection. It's to understand where alignment already exists, where gaps are, and which capacities offer the greatest leverage for meaningful work. It also changes how we think about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. DEIB is not a thing that organizations do. It's how it does all the things it does. It should be visible in leadership, communications, accountability, in every system, not isolated in a training, a committee, or an annual initiative. That's the shift Lir is helping organizations make, moving from disconnected cultural initiatives to a coherent approach to organizational alignment. So instead of asking, how do we improve our culture? The better question is, how do we strengthen alignment between what we say we value and what people experience every day? Because when alignment improves, the daily experience changes. And when the daily experience changes, culture follows. So as you think about your own organization, where you see alignment and where you might see a gap, I would love to continue this conversation with you.